Generally in November, I like to do one video on a game that I'm really thankful for. So last year was Dark Cloud, and for this year, I couldn't think of anything better than Wind Waker. Though I'm sure talking about how much you love Wind Waker is hardly anything new these days, because everybody loves Wind Waker. Legally, by law, if you don't, your life is forfeit, for that is the law of the internet. And I'm happy we can live in such a tyranny-filled world where everyone can see how amazing Wind Waker is, without proceeding to complain about how childish they think the game looks before proclaiming that Zelda is dead and having the biggest hissy fit ever known to man in the middle of some EB games. With a huge, expansive world to sail around in and explore, tons of side content, fun gameplay, a fantastic story, and visuals that are so good that they will stand the test of time long after your GameCube finally breaks in 60 years, because those are durable as hell. And they had a handle. Just saying. But before the magical whimsy of Wind Waker was nestled snugly in your GameCube, what lurked in the shadows around the game's conception is a product that may have been very different from the final game. From it having a different art style, to cut out dungeons, and even losing a mechanic that would have allowed Link to age over the course of the game. And since talking about beta stuff has kind of been my thing since 2009, why stop now? It's almost Thanksgiving! Today on Gaming Mysteries, I'll be talking about the beta of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. Now, of course, our story begins at around the dawn of the GameCube, more specifically the year 2000 at Space World 2000, during which Nintendo had several software demonstrations on hand to show the power of the GameCube. We saw an early version of Luigi's Mansion and Metroid Prime, though it's the Zelda portion of the demonstration that left everyone in awe. Featuring Link and Ganondorf fighting one another in a dark castle, both sporting a very nice graphical update from their N64 counterparts. It was impressive to say the least, and fully sold everyone on the GameCube. Because who wouldn't be excited for this new Zelda game? The people who remembered that it was just meant to be a tech demo? Yes, but everyone else was very stoked. Which may seem silly, but keep in mind, Luigi's Mansion and Metroid Prime both made it out of this demonstration as full games, so no one really had a reason to think that this wouldn't happen, and I mean no one. That includes the media, because IGN referred to the demo as absolutely everything we could have hoped for in a GameCube Zelda title, and that the future looks very bright for Nintendo loyalists. Unless you like a lot of RPGs, because you're only going to get like 10 good ones. Sorry about that, guys. And so it was that fans and media alike speculated for one long year what this new Zelda game would be like, until the following year's Space World presentation, in which Nintendo flipped the script and also made a record-scratching noise as they showed the actual new Zelda game, The Wind Waker, in a trailer that displayed a game that looks as though it played pretty similarly to the other 3D titles, but everyone was far too busy bitching about the art style to notice that. So as you may have seen, maybe, Nintendo ditched the dark, gritty design that was seen in the previous year, replacing it with a bright, happy, more expression-filled design instead, leaving the tech demo as just that, a tech demo. As such, a lot of people think that it doesn't really play an important role when talking about Wind Waker's development, though I disagree, as there is some credence that this maybe have been a thing at one point, given that in the final game you can access an unused room that looks pretty similar to the room that Link and Ganondorf were fighting in that original tech demo. Though beyond that, it's rumored that at E3 2001, before Space World took place and displayed Wind Waker, it said that there was a playable demo of the realistic version of the game behind closed doors. Now, this is probably bullshit, and by probably I mean it's definitely bullshit. But even if it is, the Zelda tech demo is a key part of Wind Waker's history, for at least the fans, or me, so I don't feel that it should be disregarded completely. Grid aside though, let's actually take a look at the trailer now and the beta of the Wind Waker. The trailer shows adorable Link fighting enemies in both an early version of the Forsaken Fortress and an early version of the Fairy Woods on Outset Island, and this cutscene, which I think may be taking place in a beta Forest Haven. Not really sure. It's beyond the fighting and partial cutscenes where we begin to notice some differences between this and the final game though. To start, the trailer shows Link wearing clothes with the same color scheme as that found in the original Legend of Zelda, something that would remain a constant until very late into the game's development. Why it was changed, or even why they used that color scheme to begin with, I can't say, but it's pretty neat. While on the subject of things that remained a constant until late in the game's development though, we have, well, Nintendo using Link's voice from Majora's Mask as a placeholder, but mostly the HUD. Now, it's by no means uncommon for games to redesign their HUDs multiple times before they see a final release, and Wind Waker is no different, as its HUD looks different. Your items are contained within a sphere at the top right-hand side of the screen, and the sword icon is there as expected. The interesting thing to take away from this is, if you take a close look at the sword icon, it's mapped to the A button and not the B button. So originally you were going to attack with A and roll with B, which I'm glad they changed, because switching A and B is the equivalent of switching X and O with PlayStation. It bothers the fuck out of me. Now, if we look at the gameplay specifically, it doesn't seem that different from the final game, give or take a few missing icons like the one for performing a counter attack, but aside from that, it looks pretty much like Wind Waker. Except for one thing, as there's a portion of the trailer that shows Link sneaking, and no, not hiding in a barrel sneaking, it's actual sneaking, with the sneaking animation and everything. Some have speculated that the inclusion of this may have either meant that Link was originally going to be able to make use of sneaking abilities while in the Forsaken Fortress, or that the game was perhaps just going to include more of these kinds of elements, which I think is highly unlikely. As when you look at the rest of the game, sneaking doesn't really seem to solve that many problems. Hell, the only reason you did it in the Forsaken Fortress was because you didn't have a sword, and you had no choice. But during that second visit, you get to murder everyone, which is far more effective than just being extra quiet and sneaky, so the sneaking thing was most likely something that was made specifically for this trailer. Much like the sequence towards the end of the video where Link jumps in the chandelier. Doesn't happen in the final game, and it's just there to make things look nice, much like how the art style is there to make things look nice. But that's it as far as this trailer goes. It ended with the year 2002, implying the game's release date, so from there moving forward into the next year, all fans could do was speculate, and complain, and come up with the term Zelda. Bastards. The following year though, at E3 2002, we got another look at the new title, and a playable demo. Of course, with this trailer, the game looked a lot more finalized, so much so that you won't see too many standout differences. The only one that really stands out is the HUD, which at this point changed again. The sword icon is still mapped to the A button, though to attack you would still hit B, which makes me wonder which button was going to do rolling. More importantly though, the HUD is missing a key button, Z. If you look at the final HUD, there are 6 buttons. 1 for attack, 1 for rolling, 1 for defense, and 3 for your items. In this trailer, however, you only have 5 buttons. 1 for your sword, 1 for attacking with your sword, 2 for items, and 1 for defense. As a side note, I would like to apologize that the footage is kind of grainy and hard to make out. It's old footage, so I can't really help it, but sorry about that. Anyways, I for the life of me can't figure out why they would just remove one of your command slots unless the R button wasn't for blocking and was just another button to assign items to, but that seems too unlikely as your shield is kind of an important item. Unknown changes aside, E3 passed, and so at this point all fans could do was wait for the game to finally be released, which if you lived in Japan you only had to wait a couple of months. For everyone else you had to wait till next year. But the game finally came out, and it was amazing. I mean, people still complained for a few years, but damn it was amazing. Though, the end of trailers doesn't mean the end of information, as there's a lot of interesting left out content to be talked about still. And I can think of no better way to start this section than with a removed gameplay mechanic. When looking at early concept art of Wind Waker, you'll see pictures that depict an older form of Wind Waker Link. This is because initially, much like how Link could age in Ocarina of Time, they wanted this Link to age, though at a subtle rate as you played through the entire game, which sounds like an amazing idea, especially when you see this other concept art that shows the older Link going toe-to-toe with Ganondorf. And of course, if you're going to have Link age over the course of the game, then that would make that picture the final boss fight, and that would have been rad as shit. Unfortunately though, Nintendo had a difficult time implementing the idea, so it was eventually scrapped. I can't really blame them though. I mean, that's a pretty ambitious idea for a Zelda game. But here's hoping that they come back to it someday. Other concept art will show you some early designs of other characters, like the King of Red Lions, who looks a little derpy, and also various different designs for Tetra, which all look pretty nice, though all things considered, I prefer the final version. Now I'd like to take the time to go over various left out areas, whether they be islands or dungeons. They were left out. To start on an amusing note, Wind Waker, as shown by this concept art, was originally going to have an area called GC Island. Said island looking like a GameCube, which is amazing, especially if they kept that handle. It's hard to say what the purpose of this was, though either way it's a shame it didn't show up, because it's a giant GameCube island. But for those bummed, lucky for you, Nintendo didn't ditch the idea of having an island based on one of their video game playing machine devices, as Phantom Hourglass received DS Island, which looked like a DS, if you didn't guess. So everybody wins, I guess. Next up, we have Stovetop Island, and this is a bit more elaborate, as it had a giant volcano, a hot spring, a cave, and what looked like a town at the base of the island, making me think that this area may have been meant to be playing a much more important role at one point. I mean, a volcano plus a village equals a dungeon, usually, sometimes, but since it was scrapped so early on, it's hard to pinpoint what its true purpose was. If nothing else, it looks important. Next, we're going to move on to remove dungeons, though. Now it's confirmed by Aonuma that there were at least 2 cut dungeons from the Wind Waker. It's also confirmed that these 2 dungeons were ultimately broken down and used in some other form in other Zelda games. And while we don't know much regarding the identity of these dungeons, we do have sweet speculation, as there are 2 areas in the Wind Waker that, while small, exhibit some key elements that would be found in a full-fledged dungeon. And these islands are, of course, Ice Ring Isle and Fire Mountain. The reason why people believe that these 2 islands were once much more elaborate and dungeon-filled rather than just being one-off puzzle areas is that, for one, both islands are marked in the full map of the Great Sea, and usually the only locations that are marked automatically are the ones that hold great significance to the plot. So we at least have reason to believe that at one point these islands were at least more significant than they currently are. Though the key element that makes people believe that these were once full-fledged dungeons is that both hold important pieces of equipment that you need in order to progress through the game. The kind of thing that they would usually use a dungeon for. And it does seem a little weird that such important items would be placed in, let's say, dinky by comparison areas. Granted, that doesn't necessarily prove anything, because Ocarina of Time had an equivalent to the Ice Ring Island with its Ice Cavern, both mini-dungeons and both give you the Iron Boots. Of course, Ocarina of Time also had potentially cut dungeons, so now we're back to square one. Either way, it sucks that these dungeons were omitted, and also not added to the HD remake, and yes, I've read the reasoning behind the HD omission, but I still think it's a bummer, because I like dungeons. Next up, we have miscellaneous item information. To start, a mysterious item can be found through hacking, and though its icon is just Japanese text, that text translates to water boots. As they're unfinished, even though you can access them, they don't really do anything. It's said though that these were just going to be iron boots with different functions, and I think that's completely reasonable. I mean, the game is all about water. Why shouldn't Link have water boots that let him do stuff in the water? Like drown. The Skull Hammer was changed a bunch over the game's development, originally just being called Hammer, as it had no distinguishing characteristics at the time, though as development went forward, the item finally got its own identity as the Skull Hammer, vastly more cool than just Hammer. While looking through the ISO of Wind Waker, you'll find that there are 2 additional sails that are left unused. One is called the Zora Sale, and the other is called the Tinkle Sail, or the Tingle Sail. It's unknown what either of these sails were to do, though it's assumed that they would give you additional abilities while sailing, like perhaps the Zora Sail would make you sail faster. If so, it could be a very early version of the new sail that was introduced in the HD version of the game. In the final version of the game, you were allowed to pick up dropped enemy weapons, and in the early versions of the game, when you do so, your sword icon would change to that of the weapon you just picked up, which is a very nice touch. So I can't really see why they didn't include it, other than the fact that your sword is usually more effective than theirs, so why pay attention to them? But I don't know. There was also a mysterious item called the Wind Waker Stone. No one knows what purpose this item was to hold, as all we have is its icon, and I don't even have a guess as to what it could have been, but I figured I'd mention it because, someone will get mad if I don't say it. And to end, we have some interesting unused textures and an assload of test maps that scare the hell out of me. So we're gonna get started with textures. While looking through unused files, you can find various early models of certain characters or enemies, as well as some insane stuff. The sane stuff would be like this early version of Poe, who is missing most of his textures, and is kind of creepy. And speaking of creepy, look at this fucking thing. It's a dude's head. Probably someone who was working on the game. But still, it's all kinds of weird. And of course, we end with test maps. And much like with other test maps, it's as if someone did a lot of drugs and made a test map. There's really not much to say about the maps themselves, as they are mostly nonsense, given that their sole purpose was just to test out various game mechanics. But if you have an action replay, it's fun to mess around in these areas. So do it if you have the opportunity. Recommended by me. But that's the beta of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Well, over the course of its development, the game saw many changes that some would argue are for the worst, while others say it's for the best. Personally, I'm more than satisfied with the final product, because it's just so fucking good. Sure, it may not be super dark and gritty, but not every game has to be that way. I mean, fuck, did anyone pay attention to the last generation of gritty-ass games? Personally, I like a nice, lighthearted romp every once in a while, and Wind Waker delivered that and much, much more. And at the end of the day, what more could you ask for? A big bag of money? Yes, but it's not Christmas yet. Sorry. This has been Gaming Mysteries. Thanks for watching. Hi guys, Yuriofwind here, and welcome back to End Slate, the holiday edition of End Slate, because it's almost Thanksgiving, close enough. I just did a Gaming Mysteries in the beta of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, and I hope you enjoyed it very much, really I do. I've been meaning to talk about this since, April, but then, Nintendo went a little weird for a while there, so it didn't happen, but now I finally got a chance to do it, so yay. And it worked out, because, I am thankful for Wind Waker, and that fits the theme, so... But first order of business. Since this is a Thanksgiving End Slate, I'm not going to be whoring out my videos today, so I'm just going to go ahead and fade the two videos there at the top right there. There we go. Those are faded. I'd fade the text that says subscribe, but I don't have a file of just my avatar person thing, so we're just going to leave it. Pretend it's not there. What I wanted to do is take this End Slate time to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, because I'm probably not going to be making a video on Thanksgiving Day. I'm probably going to be sleeping, and then maybe eating Thanksgiving dinner if I remember to eat. I don't actually know yet, but I wanted to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, safe travels, don't get killed. That happens sometimes. Just avoid Black Friday entirely, I guess. I don't know. Eat, drink, be merry, and then next month, do it again. So until the next video, which would be next month, I got it planned out, you guys, which means it's probably gonna fall flat on my fucking face. It's gonna be great. But I hope everyone has a nice rest of the week, and I will see you guys next time in a video, which is gonna be an obscure gaming, by the way. Spoiler alert, it's December, but even so. Bye, guys. Happy holiday, or not happy holidays yet. Merry Thanksgiving. Close enough. Merry Thanksgiving. Bye, guys.